After you have your 3 pieces pinned on, let's do a final check of a couple of things. One, make sure that no part of any of the pins is sticking out past the cutting line, which is this dark line that's on the perimeter of the pieces. And then also make sure that those pins that we used along the selvage to hold the 2 pieces together, or the 1 piece together, are all removed, because we don't want to accidentally hit our scissors with a pin. That's very damaging to fabric scissors. Okay, so we need to be very careful when we're cutting. We want the fabric to basically be the same shape as the pattern. So let me tell you a little bit about scissors before we start. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to use right-handed shears. My thumb goes in the single hole, and then I usually put my last 3 fingers in the bigger hole, and my pointer stays out. My pointer helps guide the scissors. Now, if I'm left-handed, you're going to use the left-handed shears. Again, you put your thumb in the thumb hole, 3 fingers into the last 3 fingers into the bigger hole, and pointer is sticking out. I'm going to show you how to use these in just a second. So to make this a little bit easier to cut, the first thing I'm going to do is rough cut. And rough cutting means that I'm just going to kind of take this piece away from these 2 pieces to make them a little bit easier to handle. So I'm just going to not worry about where I'm cutting, other than just kind of up the middle here, all the way across. I'm really just kind of cutting a rough shape. Okay, and I'm going to move this one out of the way for the time being, and we're going to concentrate on the pocket. Now, before we cut the pocket, I want to remind you, we are not cutting on this side at all. We're cutting just these 3 sides. Don't cut over here. I have several students who do that, and then they don't have another piece big enough to make their pocket. So don't cut on this side over here. That's why we wrote the words here. So when I'm cutting, if I'm right-handed, I put my non-dominant hand on the fabric and the pattern, and I'm going to cut right next to the black line, and I'm cutting in a counterclockwise motion. Okay, I'm going to move this out of the way, and then I can turn my fabric. If you notice, I'm trying to keep it as flat as possible as I am working. Try not to cut any of the black line off, but don't leave a big chunk of white outside the black line. This is the only one I'm going to cut out completely, because it takes a bit of time to cut. And remember, you can't cut until I have checked your pinning. And then this last one, remember, I'm only cutting 3 sides of this. This one's done. We don't cut over here. And I'm going to move that out of the way. The little one, we do cut around all on 4 sides. I'm not going to show you how to do that one. That one's pretty simple. But I am going to rough cut off this big chunk, because we're going to use it for something else later. Okay, and I'm going to set that aside. This kind of stuff cannot be recycled because it has polyester in it. So it's going to go in our landfill container. The white paper can go into the recycle bin. Please be careful when you get rid of your excess. Okay. Let's talk about the big one. This is basically just a big rectangle, and so it's fairly easy to cut. The problem is this little corner right here. This is the most difficult thing right here. And so we have to make sure that when we cut this, we don't cut that little corner off, because that's important to the casing that's going to be at the top of your bag. So I'm going to flip this around this way, and I'm going to show you how to do this right-handed, and then I'm going to show you how to use the left-handed scissors. I'm not real good at them, but I will show you how your hand should be. And so I'm just cutting along this line. And I'm actually going to cut a little bit past it, but not cut that corner off. Then with just the tips of my scissors, I'm going to clip right into that little spot right there. Wiggle my scissors back in, and then I'm going to cut right along that edge. Okay? Remember, you don't want to cut that corner off. Then I would continue cutting all the way around, always using my non-dominant hand to keep the fabric flat and cutting in a counterclockwise motion. If I am left-handed, I am going to use the left-handed scissors basically in the same way, and I want to get the scissors up right next to the black line and cut right next to the black line without cutting it off. Okay? And that's about as far as I can go with lefties because I'm really not a left-hander. But again, you're going to use your right hand, which if you're left-handed, that's your non-dominant hand. You're going to keep flat with that. And then you're going to use your left hand holding the scissors and cut right next to the line without cutting it off. And be very, very careful. Okay? That's how we cut out the bag. The next thing I'm going to show you is how to cut out the sample. Okay, we've got our 3 pattern pieces all cut out, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to cut out our sample with that extra chunk that I asked you not to cut through. To do this, we're going to need a chalk pencil or regular pencil and a seam gauge and a pair of scissors. I put 1 pin in here just to kind of keep the layers together. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to slip my scissors into the fold and just cut up that side so that now I have 2 layers of fabric. I'm going to take my seam gauge and I'm going to lay it along this edge. We're actually going to use this right angle to help us out, so we only have to cut two ways. So I'm going to lay this right up next to the edge. My sample is supposed to be 4 inches by 6 inches. Okay, and I'm just going to make some marks using the whole length of my ruler for the 6 inches. Maybe 1 more. Okay, and then I'm going to take my seam gauge and set the slider right at the 4 inches. And I'm going to go back this way. This really doesn't have to be a continuous line, but they do need to be kind of close together so you can cut along them. And the pin here is just to keep the layers from shifting around while I'm cutting. Okay, so 4 inches this way, 6 inches this way. This needs to be pretty accurate. So let's go ahead and we're going to take our scissors and I'm just going to cut along that line. And cut along this line. I'm going to keep these 2 pieces pinned together so I know this is not a scrap. This is actually my sample. And then I can hang on to these other larger pieces of scrap. These can be used to test my machine when I'm getting ready to sew. So all of this is going to go into my big plastic bag. And the next thing that we're going to do is marking.